This is the new Volkswagen Touareg. This is the new Volkswagen Touareg, a model that rivals the likes of the Range Rover because it's Volkswagen's flagship SUV. That means it's got a load of new technology, both inside and out, so there's a lot to test and also to see what's going to trickle down into smaller Volkswagens in the future. So let's get cracking.
The Touareg R is the top dog in Volkswagen's lineup. It therefore gets the most muscle of the bunch, mating a 3-litre turbocharged V6 to hybrid technology borrowed from Porsche for peaks of 462 horsepower and 450 Nm of torque. Flat out, this brute will hit 62 mph in 5.1 seconds and power onto a 155 mph limited top speed. Drive sensibly, and Volkswagen reckons you'll get 30 miles of electric range, or drive onto the mucky stuff, and this all-wheel drive machine ought to be pretty effective as well. Although, for this review, we're starting on the tarmac.
Before we hit the road, I just wanted to show you a cool feature on this car. Now, you've seen some images of its design. It looks pretty sensible, but if you look up close, especially if you look at the headlights, there's some very cool tech on the exterior indeed. This headlight here, and the one on that side, of course, has over 38,000 individual pixels for its matrix LED beams. And that means not only do you project one beam of light, but you've actually got kind of 38,000 and a bit more beams. And that means you can modify the light depending on if a car's coming, or it can bend and flex around, not technically, of course, objects that get in the way. So it means you don't have to worry about anything. This thing will always give you the maximum light. And at the back, there's a feature that would have been popular with your Amazon/eBay/Halfords buyers of the last few years. And that is an illuminated badge on the rear. You've probably seen it and thought, what the hell are they thinking on modified cars? But now it's standard on this, and dare I say it, doesn't look too bad. What do you think? Don't forget, when searching for your next car, make sure you check out cinch.co.uk or download our app. And if you're enjoying this video, why not click the subscribe button? Now, before we get started, it's worth stressing just how much of an important car the Touareg is to the Volkswagen brand. It is, and has been pretty much since it arrived in the early part of the 21st century, being described as a car that can take on the Range Rover, but with Volkswagen prices. And yeah, Volkswagen prices have crept up like everything in this world, because now you're going to need close to 70 grand just to get close to one of these. And if you want a model like this plug-in hybrid R here, well, yeah, you're into the 80s quite fast. But this is a car that comes packed with premium and genuinely luxury technology, some of which trickles down, just like the S-Class does with Mercedes, into lower ranked Volkswagens in the years that follow. And while yeah, we don't have those ridiculous numbers attached to a big engine like we have in previous generations of the Touareg, some of you might remember the V10 model that towed a 747 with its 750 Nm of diesel torque, and then the possibly even more mad W12 Touareg, which, well, made a great sound and drank a lot of petrol while it was at it, but actually had some really clever fuel-saving systems as well. This car and this generation model doesn't come with anything as grand as that, but especially in this plug-in hybrid model, it does come with some very appropriate and useful powertrain technology. But of course, I'm going to talk about that a bit later on, because first I want to explore what's changed in this 4th generation car across all of the models, no matter what powertrain you go for. Now, as before, you've got a lot of standard equipment. You've got air suspension, which can be set to different levels. It ensures this SUV is also a proper 4x4 and it can go off-roading, which we'll test a bit later in this video. But it also comes with a raft of driver assistance features to make this massive car, it basically is a cathedral on wheels, especially if you lift the seat up. Well, it doesn't feel that massive on the road because visibility, both analog visibility, the stuff through my eyes, and also the stuff around me and the digital tech, is very helpful. Now, in this latest generation car, we've got a 15-inch screen in the middle, and it is big. It makes most iPads look pretty small. And again, a massive instrument cluster ahead of me here. So your tech is really, really high standard. And the sat-nav now as well is really, really high definition. You can zoom right in and get a lot more detail from the screen. But before we get to any of that stuff, just driving this Touareg, it's clear that this is Volkswagen's flagship model because it is very nice to drive. It feels luxury. I mean, it's not too dissimilar in some ways to what you get in a Range Rover in the way that it feels big and chunky and weighty, but also really well controlled. Yeah, it's got a bit of a wallow to it if you start to put some steering input into it, but that is all part of what makes cars like this feel so luxurious. All right, yeah, Porsche does things slightly differently, and the Cayenne, which kind of rivals this, and also the Audi Q7. They do try and be a bit sportier in some ways, but I think what really buyers love in this category, especially on this side of the segment, is just how plush this stuff feels, and this definitely feels plush. You can set the ride as well through different modes, but I've just left it in standard road mode, and it's ironing out the bumps very well indeed. There are occasional thuds. You're aware that this particular model has 22-inch wheels in it. 22-inch wheels on a car as standard on this R model. You can only get wheels as small as 20-inch on the lower spec cars, so it's big wheels all round no matter what. And so you do feel the weight of the wheel in certain bumps, but the thud you hear doesn't necessarily translate into much in the way of what you feel through the car itself.
Yes, the magic of this massive car is how it shrinks around you on the move, and how its electrified powertrain masks a 2.5-ton curb weight so effectively. Helping that is the air suspension, which tenses up under load through bends, although it never really makes the Touareg feel exciting or engaging like its R badge suggests. Instead, it just ensures the car feels eager rather than cumbersome. That's true for the plug-in hybrid powertrain as well, which has so much electric shove from low down that you get the sense the 3-litre V6 can remain fairly relaxed in everything up to highly spirited driving.
So let's see how it rolls into this corner here. It's actually raining now, just to make matters harder, but four-wheel drive, we've got a grip. It actually feels as though the car is tightening its line mid-corner as well. So once I'm into the bend, I can feel the car just start to tighten even more. So it is actually very willing to turn in. So it does feel authentically R in cross-country pace sense, although in terms of enjoyment, engagement, feel, nah, there's none of that here. I mean, all the controls are very light, very effortless, and don't give you anything in the way of feedback. But come on, who's expecting that from a car as big as this? Actually, caveat that, Porsche can do it, but Volkswagen doesn't need to do it. Now, what about the uniqueness of this powertrain? Of course, you can get a diesel and you can get petrol as well. In fact, you can get 2 diesels, and they've got fair amounts of power and torque, but this being the R model with that electric oomph and obviously having a battery under the boot floor, well, it's got by far the most performance. So come on, let's test it. Let's get it into sport, foot to the floor. That's quick, yeah. It really gets up and going. And you know what? It's one of those powertrains where kind of the opposite of electric cars, which often give you a real shove in the back from low down, and then it sort of peters away. This thing gets up and goes, and then gets up and goes even more when it changes up to the next gear. I think it was 3rd gear and then 4th gear were real shoves in the back. So it is quick, I do not doubt that. But yet it can handle its mass because of that intelligent air suspension. Brakes are strong as well. I don't brake any harder because I think we'd have camera gear flying through the windscreen. And of course, you can use the electric performance in this to turn that petrol engine off. It will do it automatically at lower speeds, and there are moments when I've come down and if I get it back out of sport and I just let the car slow down, I've noticed points where it felt like the engine was off completely. Now you get over 20 miles in electric only mode, which isn't particularly spectacular these days, given some cars are doing over 40, but this is firstly a big car, therefore it's heavy, and I think most urban dwellers are going to be able to manage probably most of their commutes with that mileage. So it's useful, definitely. But I think this car's happiest place is, of course, when both parts of the powertrain are working together. So it feels like a luxury product on the move, and do you know what? With the small improvements they've made to the cabin versus the 3rd generation Touareg, yeah, it does feel like a luxury product, even when you're parked up and you're poking things. Now, Volkswagen told us this morning that they've upgraded some of the materials in the cabin, and it is true that everything I put my hand on and rest my elbow on feels very nice and comfortable. Even the steering wheel here is a very slight cushioning to it, so it all feels very comfortable. Although there are still a few scratchier plastics lower down, but they are quite out of reach, so relatively forgivable. But what you're really focused on, of course, is this technology. Now, I mentioned you've got these big screens both here and here, and they do dominate the driving experience when you're not looking out the windscreen. So it means you've got a really clear access to sat nav. It means you've got a nice simple screen as well. Now, they've integrated bits of tech that you'll recognize from other models, including some ID models. I think some of the icons look a bit ID-ish, and it means it's nice and simple and quick to use. There's also voice control tech, but what's key is that these big screens are fast and responsive. They react like a smartphone, and handily, because they're big, it means all the buttons are really big as well, so it's quite easy to navigate through the menus while driving along, so you're bouncing around and you can actually hit the big buttons, which is good. Instrument cluster ahead is customizable. It'll be very familiar to Volkswagen owners because it's just a bigger version of what you see in smaller cars. So lots of tech, very clear displays, and the sat-nav can be displayed in there as well, which is helpful. As for the rest of the interior, well, the seats are very comfortable. These are leather seats in this R model. They're supportive, they're nicely cushioned. Not the most comfortable seats out there, but definitely pretty nice. I wish they had a slightly softer headrest. Range Rovers do that very well when you get the cushion up there. But I guess that's slightly figurable. This is the R model, so it has to hold you a bit firmer. As for your storage space, you've got decent amount of room for your phone down there. Cup holders in here. You could probably get a smaller can in there and then a bigger cup in there. But because this is a proper 4x4 model with a big petrol engine up front, there's a lot of technology running through the middle of the car. So it does mean this is pretty shallow. There's not actually that much space in there. I mean, I've thrown the keys in there. You might get a phone in there and a notepad, I guess, if you carry one of those, but it doesn't go very deep. And the same can be said for the glove box in here, which, as you'll see, the books that come with the car, they don't fit in it. So you have to store it in here, but at least you've got lots of tech up here, and it actually does make the driving experience more enjoyable and easier as well, especially when you're parking, which we did do earlier. So let's just show you how good that camera is now. Now, as you can see, this car is massive. I've mentioned that a few times now, but the reversing camera is very sharp. The graphics are really clear, and it rotates the camera as you turn the wheel as well. So your visibility is excellent. It's almost fisheye as well on that camera. So I can really see wide. And then you've got these helpful guidelines as well. Plus, you've got the 360 camera, which projects your view from above using the cameras around the car. So visibility is great on this car. The turning circle isn't amazing, but it is a big car, and it is a 3-litre engine under the front, so the wheels haven't got tons of space to move, but it is certainly manageable given the scale. And of course, there is a load of additional tech in this car to do with its off-roading. There are all these dials down here which can control your ride height so you can get over obstacles, and also how the traction control and the stability control systems and everything else in between are set so this thing can go off-road. And we are about to do that, so let's cut to my moments of being off-road now.
Now, we have to admit, Volkswagen did swap us into a left-hand drive diesel Touareg for our go on the mud course, which, to be fair, was a relief, because I didn't fancy scratching the R's 22-inch rims on the rough stuff. Anyway, with its air suspension raised to its maximum in off-road mode, the Touareg, still wearing standard road tyres, did its best impression of a Range Rover in the mud. It made mincemeat of the river crossing, with a 580mm wading depth, and the 360-degree camera views ensured I could guide the car accurately along. Although unlike Land Rover, Volkswagen doesn't yet have the undercar camera view, although the 3D mode was especially useful and realistic.
Does it do the indicators? Oh, yes it does.
Didn't know that.
I love that. That is detail right there. Brake lights. Oh, it does the brake lights. That's amazing. Right, should we do the final one? If it does the headlights. Oh, it does. That's amazing. That's amazing.
I told you I haven't, lad.
There we go.
I did that.
That's the level of detail I love.
Yep.
Yeah. And the clever traction systems also meant a steep, very muddy hill could be climbed even if the driver has a clumsy right foot. Same goes for the way back down the hill, because the car's intelligent hill descent control tech, which controls the brakes automatically, does the work for you. Alright, back to the interior.
Alright, so we can definitely do the off-road thing, but let's see if it can carry passengers in the back in comfort as well. Now, in the back of the car, it is very spacious indeed. I've got acres of legroom, loads of footroom, despite this being pretty low, and loads of knee room. Look, I can almost stretch my legs out, so it's pretty comfortable in here, and the seats are quite wide as well. And with the full-length panoramic sunroof, it feels really airy and spacious in here, which is going to add to the luxury that you get from the comfortable air suspension. You've got a few features as well to go with, of course, the full leather seats in this R model. We've got a nice wide section here for 2 vents, which are both individually controlled, and you can also change the direction and the direction of airflow. So if those 2 up front are blowing completely the wrong temperatures for you in the back here, you can change it because you've got vents here and vents up here as well. So it's nice and luxurious and comfortable. Now, you do also have space for skis. So before I get into the middle seat to test how comfortable it is, if you don't have your arms resting on here with your cups in here, you can also lower this bit separately to the rest of the seats, which is quite interesting. So instead of it being a 2 and 1 or the whole thing folding down, it's 1, 1, 1. So you've got a proper ski hatch here, or of course, if you wanted to reach through and grab something out of the boot while you're on the move, you can do that. It's really easy to do that with that down here. But if you've got a passenger in the middle, it's pretty spacious. Again, the seat below me is nice and wide. I've got loads of headroom with this panoramic sunroof here because it really lifts the ceiling of the car, although I am sitting a bit higher, but I've got a nice commanding view. The key thing to note is, of course, because this is a proper four-wheel drive model, so there is actual hardware going through the floor of the car here. I've got a very wide tunnel here, but while that does mean I can't put my legs in the middle unless I want to do that, it does actually not feel that bad because I've got loads of space here. So unless you've got people with massive feet on this side or very selfish people, you're going to be very comfortable. It's a decent 5-seater, this car, which bodes well for space in the boot. Or at least it does when it comes to the purely petrol or diesel cars, but this particular car is the plug-in hybrid, remember? So once the automatic tailgate lifts, you will see that we have got a big bag here for the charge cables, and there isn't space under the boot floor to hide them away because, well, that's where the battery begins, somewhere in there. So it does mean you lose quite a lot of space. Not only underfloor storage is gone, but also some of your boot space is gone thanks to this bag. It does tie down at least, so it doesn't slide around. But if you can tuck it up here, all right, not too bad. But definitely if it's boot space you're after, you're gonna wanna look at the non-plug-in hybrid cars. But let's assume you don't need all that room. It definitely is a pretty usable space, not least because the tailgate is quite high up here. The roofline is fairly flat before the boot lid. And of course, you've got this flat section here. So you've got nice, tough materials down here. And you can slide heavy items in, no problems. And of course, if you want to lower the boot to make stuff easier, you can do that because you've got air suspension. So you press this button here and the car goes down, like it's literally going down right now, which is quite cool. So the new Touareg is definitely a lot of car and a lot of car for the money. Even in this R spec here, which is getting a bit pricey, it's still way under what you pay for a Range Rover, for example. And yeah, it can do all the things a Range Rover can do. Okay, all right, I know off-roading, this did go off-road. I'm sure a Land Rover enthusiast would tell me a Range Rover would go a little bit further, but for the most of us, this thing can go as far as anyone would ever dream on the mucky stuff. And when it comes to the road, it steers, handles, and even powers nicely. Yet not involving, and it doesn't feel like an R that's gonna set your hair on fire, but it will definitely get you down a road in all conditions at whatever speed you choose. It is a very impressive car, and I honestly mean it when I say it is a lot of car for the money. Honestly, big car, big personality, and big tech. What do you think though? Let us know in the comments below. Would you take this over, for example, the Range Rover, or would you take a Cayenne because it's a bit sportier, or maybe even the Audi Q7? I mean, this shares a lot of parts with those cars, but it does feel different enough. And of course, that price is very important. Let me know. And of course, don't forget to click subscribe if you haven't already, and like this video if you fancy it. Cheers.